I'm Ed Heminger, and I'd like to tell you about what we call the Great Glass Theft at the Hancock Historical Museum. The story begins in 1970, and I'd like to explain a little bit about the glass before we discuss the action that came later. The glass was a collection of Judge Chester Pendleton and his wife Blanche. They had traveled extensively over their lives and had accumulated the collection that you see behind me and had displayed it in their homes. It is not Findlay glass, it's simply art glass which came from various parts of the world. Mrs. Pendleton passed away, and again going back to 1970, the judge was a widower and was deciding what he could do with the collection. They had one daughter, and she was not interested in keeping the collection, but it was up to her dad to decide what to do. A few of us, there were 5 friends of mine, we were considering hopefully the commencement of a historical museum here in town. Being aware of the judge's collection, we went to him before we had anything tangible to talk about and inquired if he would be willing to give the glass collection to a museum if we were able to start one. At that time, the Toledo Museum of Art was seeking his glass, but the judge was anxious to see it stay in Findlay if he could. So he gave us encouragement, and indeed, within the year, the Foundation Historical Museum was launched, and the building in which we stand on West Sandusky Street became the museum. One of the conditions the judge had was that the glass be displayed exactly as it was in their home, which involved the building of suitable cases to house the glass when we brought it to this location. All went well. The move was made. The judge, before he passed away, was able to see his collection safely ensconced in the museum, and all was going well until 5 years later, July 2nd, 1975. I was in my office, the newspaper office, located about 5 blocks from here, and received a telephone call from a neighbor that a window was open at the museum. Well, knowing something could be wrong, I scooted down, walked down, and upon arrival here noticed that a window on the west side of the museum indeed was open. It was not only open, but appeared there had been some action. The drapes were tied back, and I suspected immediately that something was awry. Upon coming in, I found the glass cases had been broken into, and approximately 1/2 of the collection, they had 180 pieces, about 90 pieces were missing. There had obviously been a theft, and immediately the police were called to investigate. I got in touch with our fellow trustees of the museum, and they came down and were a part of the interrogation, and we immediately offered a reward of $1,000. The theft occurred on a Sunday night, and we couldn't help but think in this neighborhood that there might be people that had seen some kind of action that would be helpful. That reward was later raised to $3,000, but there was no sign of traces that led to any particular suspicion or identify possible thefts. So the glass theft was being investigated by the police over the summer. We checked with them occasionally. Nothing ever developed that they could share with us until September 5 of that same year. One of the founders was Harold Corbin, and I'm going to call him Corby. That's the way I referred to him, and that's the way the story comes in my mind. At any rate, Harold Corbin had a call about 4:30. He was an insurance agent, and he had a call at his agency, at his desk, from an unknown individual. And the individual said, "I understand you're offering a $10,000 reward for the return of the glass." Corby said, well, I don't think it's $10,000, but there's a reward. And the gentleman said, well, for $10,000, I can see that the glass is returned. He said, could I come see you? So immediately Corby said, yes, come right ahead. And the individual, when he got to Corby's office, was a gentleman that he recognized and knew. It was David Juergens, who was a ditching contractor at the time. And Mr. Juergens told Corby, he said, I did not have anything to do with the theft of the glass, but for $10,000 reward, I can see that it's returned to you. He said that there are two conditions. One is you not tell the police. If the police are told, the glass will be destroyed. The second condition is $10,000 in $20 bills. He said, I will call you in the morning and tell you where to meet me. Corby said, well, I have to talk to Ed Heminger. I was president of the association at that time. And Corby said, I need to talk to him, and I'll be in touch with you in the morning. Well, it was several hours before Corby was able to reach me, and he did make arrangements to come to my home, and arrived at my house about 7:30 that night. In the meantime, between the time that they had talked on the telephone, or rather, yes, the arrangements were made at any rate, and between that time, they called Corbin at his office again and said, you will find 4 pieces of the Findlay glass at Riverside Park. If you go to the Greenville Gardens, there's a dumpster, and you will find a box with 4 pieces of the glass in the dumpster. When Corbin arrived at my house, he had that box, and the box, he had not opened it. He had simply brought the box to my house. We opened the box, and sure enough, there were 4 pieces we recognized of the Findlay glass. Well, Corby had not been there more than 2 or 3 minutes, and there was a telephone call, and I answered the phone, and they asked to talk to Mr. Corbin. He got on the phone, and it was someone connected with the theft of the glass, and said, we simply want you to know that we know you're at Ed Heminger's house. We know that you picked up the glass at the Riverside Park. We were watching to see if you did that. We'll be in touch with you tomorrow. One of the first things we did at my house was to get a hold of one of the other trustees, Joe Opperman, a marathon attorney, thinking we might need some legal advice. And the 3 of us discussed what to do. The first question, of course, was do we get a hold of the police? And ordinarily that might have been a rather routine question to face, but we had unique circumstances at that time. It happens that the city police chief was suing our newspaper for $1 million. The relationships were not too good. So we discussed that very thoroughly and decided, Corbin recommended, he knew Juergens, and said, I think he'll produce the glass, and I think we ought to go that route. We made a decision that Corby, when he met the man the next day, Juergens, would tell Juergens they could have the glass. That is, we wanted the glass, but we would have to have the glass before the $10,000 passed, so that we had some assurance what we were doing, and the money would not be at risk. Mr. Corbin met Mr. Juergens the next day at the assigned. He received a call and met him at the assigned place, which was Miller's Restaurant on North Main Street. The 2 had coffee together, and Corby explained our position of getting the glass before the cash. Juergens said, you're jerking us around. He said, that won't do. He said, this is all got to be done by 1 o'clock. I'll see you again at 1 o'clock, or the glass will be destroyed. So Corby got a hold of me, and we decided to proceed. We'd gone that far. But there was a major thing that happened overnight. Mr. Corbin was in the insurance business. He had contacted the insurance company. The glass was insured for $80,000. The amount that was stolen was worth approximately $40,000. Mr. Corbin asked if the insurance company would put up the $10,000 that was to be passed out of the insurance funds, telling them that if the glass were not returned, they would be paying us $40,000. Would they put up $10,000 so we did not have to pay anything out of our pockets, and they would provide the money? If the glass was not returned, we would simply get $10,000 less dollars out of that $40,000. But they did put forth the $10,000. If Mr. Corbin had not been in the insurance business, I'm not sure that would have happened. But at any rate, we were given that money. So the next day, well, I should say that in the negotiations, they said that the glass would be returned upon the passing of the $20,000. And I had borrowed the $10,000, excuse me. The $10,000, I had gone to the First National Bank, gone to the bank president, and explained to him the situation. And Bob Feller, called back to the vault, asked the clerk, Mary Hindle, Mary, bring $10,000 in $20 bills to my office. Well, Mary came in the president's office. I was sitting there. She never took her eyes off of me. I think she thought that Ed Heminger had a child kidnapped. And Bob Feller kept saying, it's all right, Mary, it's all right. So at any rate, I then had the $10,000. They wanted the $10,000 put in the box that the glass had been delivered in the night before, probably to get rid of fingerprints. So I gave Corby the money. He took the box. He met at Miller's, as was prescribed, for the next day. And they got in a car and drove around town for about 20 minutes. They pulled in back of the city parking garage on East Main Cross Street. And Juergens got out of the car, took the box, was gone for just a few minutes, seconds, obviously gave the box to some other individual, got back in the car, and they drove Corbin back to Miller's restaurant. They drove back to Miller's restaurant, and Juergens told Mr. Corbin that the glass will be returned within 24 hours to some public park here in Hancock County, unless it's raining. So Corbin got a hold of me and explained what the deal had been, and we were under the pressure of wondering what might happen, whether we'd ever see the glass again, whom we were dealing with beyond Juergens. We didn't get any sleep that night, and as luck would have it, it drizzled all night, not knowing whether that was going to disrupt things or not. Next morning, Mr. Corbin sat in his office waiting a call. Toward mid-morning, we were in touch, and I decided we better have a meeting of the other three trustees to tell them we had $10,000 out there that might be gone, and to tell them about the glass theft. Called a meeting here at the museum at 4:30, and Corby told me that he would not be coming to the meeting because he'd stay in his office to see if he received a call. Well, all assembled here at 4:30, and before the meeting commenced and before anything was said about the glass theft, a call came to the museum. It was from Harold Corbin, and he said, I just had a call. He said the glass is out at the corner of Trenton Avenue and North Main Street in egg crates behind the prosecuting attorney's office, which was a strange twist. I left immediately and picked up Corbin. We went out to that corner, and sure enough, there were 6 egg crates piled up back of this building. We put them in the car immediately and took them to the museum. We didn't open it up. We got to the museum, opened up the box, one of the boxes, and looked in, and indeed it was the glass. We immediately called the police. We did not proceed any further. And the police came to the scene and took over. They were understandably upset that we had not called them, but at this point in time we had the glass. The $10,000 was paid by the insurance company, so we were home whole. An interesting episode during that time that the boxes were being delivered to the museum, Jack Harrington, one of the trustees, who was the Chevrolet Cadillac dealer at the time, came in and blustered out, and he said, "I had a very unusual situation yesterday." He said a man came in and bought a used Cadillac for $8,000, and he paid it in $20 bills. We said his name didn't have to be Juergens, did it? And he said, "Yeah, that's the guy." So here the money turned up in the hands of one of our trustees. Small world, but that's simply a sidelight. And Juergens, the police had been in contact with us, and his connection with the return was explained, and Juergens was picked up by the city police within a half an hour and was taken to the jail. He was bailed out within an hour by Jerry Simon, who turned out to be one of the prime thieves in the story. So the police then, upon interrogating Simon, had a favorable step in that Juergens decided to turn state's evidence. He was willing to testify that Jerry Simon had stolen the glass. And this held, actually, Jerry Simon went to jail for 3 to 5 years for the theft of the glass. Juergens was able to keep the $10,000. It was the legal reward that he had received. However, Juergens was subsequently picked up on an arrest for another thievery charge, so he ended up going to jail. At the trial, it came out that Jerry Simon had been at the museum with Juergens the Sunday night of the theft. He was a member of the Historical Museum and had brought in a gift of a theater program to make a gift to his museum. And Donald Smith, who was a great glass collector and was working at the museum that evening, and he acknowledged the receipt of it. Well, apparently they had opened the window on that Sunday night, and they had subsequently come back and stolen the glass. The glass was wrapped very well taken care of. It was wrapped and taken to a barn, part of the Simons family barn in Arlington. It was stored there for a month or so, and then it was taken, and Juergens was a digging contractor, and was taken out to a location close to the Little Red Schoolhouse out east of town and was buried. The glass was buried something like 6 feet deep, and was there during this period that the police were looking for an answer and so forth. And the glass remained buried out there until the deal was made with the $10,000. And the night that was raining and we were wondering what was going to happen, they were out literally digging up those boxes and took them to Juergens' house, and the glass was washed. Excuse me, it was wrapped in paper and was well taken care of. They obviously did respect the glass. We had 2 pieces that were never returned, but out of 90 pieces, that was most worth it. So we have the glass. One comment I'd make, most difficult call I ever had to make in my life was the day the glass was stolen, to call the daughter of Judge Pendleton and tell her that her parents' glass had been And obviously the reverse of that was when, upon the return of the glass, I was able to call her and explain the glass is back. So there was a happy ending to the story, but there was lots of adventure in between. And that's the great glass theft.